This is Hannibal here with a daily wrestling news update. The Chris Adams Dark Side of the Ring, which I would say is around tied with the Buff Bagwell Dark Side, is the two by far best Dark Side of the Rings of this season. Apparently, did a much lower rating than the Chris Colt Dark Side the week before, which was most people hated. Now the actual ratings were not revealed by Meltzer. He just said that he was shocked that apparently Chris Adams, who's much better known than Chris Colt, did apparently the worst rating of the entire season. The only reason I can think that this may have happened is people were so turned off by all the pornography stuff in the Chris Colt one, which really was overboard and almost sickening to some point with how graphic the director was getting. Um, Maybe so many people were turned off they didn't want to watch the, another episode. In other news, AEW has a big pay per view coming up tomorrow. They're in a 10,600 seat arena. They have about 6,101 tickets out in St. Louis. It's the Chaffeds Arena in St. Louis. So not a bad pre-sale for AEW. Someone was asking yesterday about where Riho is. She's in Japan till her work visa is renewed, and someone else was asking if Angelo Parker and Ruby Soho are legitimately having a baby. Apparently, yes, they are. Look that up for you. Angelo Parker's 41, Ruby Soho is 33, and they are having a kid in storyline and in real life. Apparently, in that same podcast I was listening to of Meltzer, where he talked about the dark side of the ring, he said Dynamite and Collision numbers are good enough as far as AEW's TV rights for stations to be interested. Rampage numbers aren't really that good, but he's unsure how high a station would pay for the TV rights fees for Tony Khan, and it's going to be a big factor on the success, the financial success of AEW going forward, because I think their current TV right deal ends towards the end of this year. He also mentioned they should try and promote their local shows better. I will point out that they did get us to cover the Ottawa Collision event. The Hannibal TV is by far the most popular YouTube channel in Canada for wrestling. That's legit. We have almost 400,000 subscribers. There's none that come even close. The guy that was supposed to do the pre-show interview for Ottawa, Evil Uno, canceled like half an hour before. So I mean, they canceled the pre-show interview. They didn't give us one for Toronto. I'm just saying, a lot of Canadian wrestling fans watch this channel. I mean, those interviews. I'm sure could have sold a few more tickets. I want them to succeed though. But Meltzer brings up with some of the low ticket sales in arenas lately, which is not the case for St. Louis. But they should try and promote local shows better. I mean, even Quebec City had a really bad crowd. Why they didn't use Rick Martel in some capacity there? I mean, Ric Flair and Rick Martel had a historic match in Quebec City, and Ric Flair's under contract with AEW. Could you imagine if they had done some segment with Ric Flair and Rick Martel in Quebec City and advertised maybe Ric Flair is going to present Martel with something since he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame? The place would have been packed. Apparently, Netflix people were at UFC 300 cage side, and Dana White was recently seen walking into the Netflix offices. So we know that TKO owns both WWE and UFC. Good chance there could be some interest in having UFC on Netflix as well. Kenny Omega has said in a recent Twitch stream that Rosie Ogawa, the guy opening this Marigold Pro Wrestling that's in association with WWE. According to him, he says stuff is going to come out about this Ogawa guy that he wasn't going to talk about, but it may affect his reputation. Of course, Ogawa is affiliated with WWE. Omega is one of the executives at AEW. So, but he also has contacts in Japan. So take that for what it's worth. I don't know anything about this guy. I don't really follow Japanese wrestling. Apparently, Eric Redbeard, who's 42 now, used to be known as Eric Rowan, has canceled all his upcoming indie dates because he has signed a contract with a company that he's not revealed. A lot of people think it's going to be part of this new Wyatt family that apparently Braun Strowman's probably also going to be a part of, Uncle Howdy, perhaps Matt Harvey, perhaps Alexa Bliss. But there's a lot of talk about this new Wyatt family post Bray Wyatt. Rodney Peterson, who got in a fight with Nate Diaz in New Orleans. Why Nate Diaz is getting in street fights, I don't know. Filed a lawsuit in the District Court of Louisiana, saying he suffered injuries to the head, neck, and brain, mental anguish, physiological distress, medical expenses, loss of income, issues with his wife, and other things. So, yeah, UFC fighters got to be very, very careful to not get in street fights. It's just not worth it. Not that Diaz is still in the UFC. And by the way, one other thing I'll mention about Chris Adams' Dark Side of the Ring. I mentioned this in my review of the Chris Adams' Dark Side of the Ring, that I think Chris really helped get Steve Austin over, despite Steve Austin bashing him. Like Adams with a gimmick with Jeannie Clark and Tony. I mean that put him on the map and got him noticed, which helped. I mean, he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But a big shot to his career was the Chris Adams angle. So as much as Steve bashes him, and I'm sure he had negative experiences with him, not to mention it's the ex-husband of his one-time wife, he did really help get him over to begin with. And Meltzer brought up in the same Wrestling Observer podcast I listened to that the first sellout in a long time in the Dallas Sportatorium since the World Class days was the CWA match that had Adams and Tony against Austin and Jeannie, and that was far after the glory days of World Class. Mike D, I would like a Headbangers interview, particularly since Violent J of ICP recently said that the Headbangers pretty much not necessarily shot on Insane Colomposity, but laid a bad beating on them on a WWE show. He also talked about Goldberg, and this was from Dan Severn's Unleashed podcast. The clips are on this channel. Go to unleashedtv.com for the full interview. Dan and I are pretty good friends, same with his podcast partner, so I'm helping getting their podcast some attention. But he also talked about an incident that no one really talks about with Evan Courageous, that people pretty much forgot about now, but he was in WCW, and Goldberg, where Goldberg pretty much legit choke slammed Evan Courageous in a shoot confrontation prior to a taping. That must have been in the days before Tank Abbott got in 3 count. Because I know Tank, he did like his time in 3 count. I know he also liked Goldberg, but I wonder whose side Tank would have taken in that fight. But apparently it didn't last long, and Doug Dillinger saw it and didn't even interfere in it. Fish Stick saying my channel is over like Rover. Well, I'm just saying that it wouldn't have hurt since it is by far, like me or not, by far the most popular wrestling YouTube channel based in Canada, that, you know, if they had AEW guys on before Canadian shows, which it would have been a pleasure for us to have, like it would have helped get word out about those shows. Ivan Santos says Chris Adams was one of the best wrestlers that never went to WWE, innovator of the super kick. His personal demons definitely screwed him over. Mike loves Rick Martel. I mean, Rick Martel is by far the greatest wrestler ever to come out of Quebec City. It boggles my mind. He has done some indie appearances in Quebec City recently. I'm sure he would have done AEW for the right price, and it would have made a huge difference. DJ Monstrosity, my Saturday's going good. I'm about to go and do a leg workout in a little bit. Training has been going very well in preparation for me getting into the ring in Napanee, Ontario, June the 29th. Someone says, Kentucky loves you. Been watching for 9 years. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've liked my time in Kentucky. I did an OVW camp there in 2002. And I liked that your bars at the time were open until 4 in the morning. That was pretty cool. I went back to do the interview with Nova years later. Nice place. I've never been to Lexington though. I'd like to go to Lexington sometime. Yeah, Mike Paul Roma is going to be on that June 29th Great North Wrestling event. Have